And I'm going to say good morning. Looking forward to our Christmas party today. Very excited. Be there 4 o'clock. It's going to be fabulous. Christini's. And don't be late. It is a sit-down dinner. We probably will kind of mix and mingle for the very beginning, but we will be sitting down probably by 4:30 for sure. So don't delay. We definitely prepare for traffic if you're coming from afar. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and share my screen in a second. I'm going to make sure that I prepare it first. And I'm going to hit slideshow play from start. All right, except you guys can't see it, can you? So that was, let me see, stop. Hold on. Let's first share my screen. Admit all. Still got people joining. I love it. Okay, share screen. Share. Okay. Now, back to here. Admit, got more people coming in. Play from start. Can you guys see Addenda Roulette? Yeah? Okay. Here we go. So let's run on in because this is going to be some fun today. True or false? Guys, unmute yourself. This is going to be an interactive game. If a buyer wants to ask for a percentage of the closing cost to go towards their buyer's commission, should they use Addenda GG? What do you think? Dun, 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 dun. I need a little music. I should have added music on my slides. I didn't think about it. True or false? What do we think, guys?
True.
We got some trues?
Is it up there?
You can't look, Lisa. No cheating. Lisa's trying to look. She's got a weird presenter view up there. Okay, Lisa's just going to be good.
Remember.
Okay, anybody else? I got one true. I got one false. Walter, what do you think?
I'm going to have to say it's false. You cannot assign percentage.
So here we go. If a buyer wants to ask for the closing costs, they need to ask for FF because FF is the only addenda where the buyer is asking for the closing costs. You see this? FF is the one that says the buyer is asking for the seller to use the money for their buyer broker to pay. Now, it could be all part or some. And in this FF agreement, remember, they're letting them know, listen, we have a separate agreement with our agent. It's called the buyer broker agreement. We're not giving it to you. We're just telling you we have one. We're saying that this FF does not supersede that agreement, okay? So essentially, it tells you here, if for some reason my buyer broker agreement with Lisa is 2% and I'm asking for 3%, Lisa doesn't get 3%. So maybe I will use 2% for Lisa and 1% for my closing costs because all part or some can be used. See, a buyer's obligation under the buyer group to pay all or a portion. So I could ask for 3% of the purchase price, only pay Lisa 2% and use the other 1% for my closing costs. You guys see that? So this buyer addenda, this is a buyer addenda asking the seller for money to be used in portion or all for the buyer's broker. Do you guys see that? And the difference here in the bottom is this is saying in the event that the buyer goes out and gets a car and now their debt to income ratio no longer allows for the amount that they were planning to pay. Let's say I was going to use the whole 3 to give to Lisa. Now I can't because my debt to income ratio won't allow me that. Now the seller can either pay the balance direct to Lisa, my buyer broker, or can keep it. Now we don't want to allow them to keep it. That's this little box over here. So we always want to check this first box. You see that? By the way, it says if left blank, it's going to divert to the seller paying it direct to the buyer's broker. You all good with that? So this FF is the only addenda that we have, guys, where the buyer is asking the seller for closing costs to be used all part or some for their buyer's agent money. You guys understand that? Any questions?
Yes.
Awesome.
I had
Just make sure. Oh, admit all.
I had one recently where they didn't want any commission, they only wanted closing costs. Should they have used this?
So if you had a deal recently where
I was on.
you were on the list side and what were they, no, here's the thing. You were on the list side. In our list agreement, were we offering closing costs?
No,
So we had said C, 10C,
right,
no.
we were offering a commission to the buyer.
Oh, we were offering commission.
Broker up to.
Yeah, so this is, well, when you, let's say I'm a buyer, I'm representing a buyer. I don't know, Lisa, I couldn't talk to you. I just want to put in an offer. I don't know if you're offering compensation. I'm going in on AFF. You follow me? I'm going in on FF. I haven't been able to talk to you. I need to put an offer in. I'm not waiting around till I can talk to you. It's been 2 days, I haven't talked to you. I'm not waiting to put my offer in, guys. I'm going in on an FF. Everybody make sense? Because the buyer is asking for money. This is the buyer asking the seller for the money. Now, if we need to change addendas, we could do so. But this is the buyer asking the seller for money. Everybody good? All right.
So you're saying this should go with your offer?
Yes, I'm saying if you do not know that the seller is offering compensation, you don't know, or you know that they're not, right? You don't know if they are, or you know for sure they're not. And the buyer wants to request it because the seller could have said, listen, I'm not offering compensation. Does that mean the buyer can't request it? Heck no, it's negotiable, right? Go in with the FF. That's when you go in with the FF. But if the buyer wants the closing costs not to pay you, if he wants it for something else, you don't need to use an FF. But if the purpose of the buyer wanting to ask for closing costs is to pay you, that's what the FF is for. All or a portion of. You see, let me just move this thing. Where's my? I can't now admit. Admit. Okay. So you see here, it says, oh, let me go back to play from current slide. Jesus, this for some reason does not let me admit people very easily when I'm in. So it says right here, it says all or a portion of, you see that, the buyer's broker compensation. So if the buyer wants to ask for some kind of monies, but it's not to pay you, then you don't need the FF. The FF is credit related to buyer broker compensation. You follow me? That's when you use FF. Everybody clear?
But Carrie, I'm not clear. So let me. So if the seller is offering 2%
Then you don't use
compensation,
the FF. You're not using the FF. You know the seller's offering compensation. You're using the FF when you don't know if the seller's offering compensation.
oh, so you cannot do to add, for example, we want to compensate, we want an additional 2%, 1.5%
We're going to
for
get to
closing
that.
costs.
We're going to get to that, but we already know the seller's offering. You follow me? This is when we don't know if the seller's offering.
I understand. Okay. Gotcha.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
All right. True or false? There's only one compensation addenda that includes the buyer. Oh, I have a lot of scary looks. Nobody's like, gosh, don't call on me. I don't want to answer this question because I don't know the answer. Here's the
Based
answer.
on you were going to get to that, that means there might be another
The answer
addendum.
is false. The GG was written because this brings the buyer in. Our compensation, seller's broker to buyer's broker, seller to buyer's broker, which is right. Oops, hold on, I'll go back to that. They do not include the buyer, right? In our listing agreement, if you've chosen 10A or 10B, the seller has, told us we have the forms ready for them to seller's broker, the seller doesn't sign. Seller to buyer's broker, we have the seller sign. But again, the buyer's not involved, is it? The buyer's not involved. But the GG involves the buyer in the compensation. And it says the contract is contingent upon either the seller's broker to buyer's broker or the seller to buyer's broker becoming acceptable to the buyer within a certain period of time. So we're still going to use these two forms, right? Because we know that there was some kind of compensation, but we want to make sure the buyer is comfortable with what those forms say. Because what happens is we've got these agents on both sides, buyer's agents, listing agents, kind of negotiating, which is exactly what this lawsuit was trying to avoid. And what if the buyer's not comfortable? Because the buyer's the one who's going to be on the hook paying the difference at closing, right? Because they have a buyer broker agreement with their agent. So if they've agreed to pay their agent 3 and the buyer broker and the sales broker are negotiating 1.5, 1, 2, 3, the buyer still has to pay their buyer broker the difference at the end. You follow me? So they need to be comfortable with how this negotiation works because they're the ones still on the hook for the difference. You follow? So that's why this is the only other thing that keeps them in the negotiation. If you don't use this, you could come back up and really have the seller's broker to buyer's broker, the buyer, seller to buyer's broker, and you never had the buyer really involved in it. How do we know the buyer was okay with it? Now the buyer's on the hook, but they can't change the contract. Right? Now, unless it's an as-is contract, they can cancel for any reason. If you got them in a residential contract, they can't even get out from that. You following me? So
Yes.
this is why it's important, the GG, if you're going to use the seller's broker or the seller to buyer's broker. So again, both FF and GG put the buyer in the negotiation. Because if we're simply using seller's broker to buyer's broker and seller to buyer's broker, we are not including the buyer in the negotiation, kind of like we did before. Everybody with me? All right. True or
Do we
false?
have to answer that?
You'll call me when you get there. True or false? If you're selling a home with solar panels, you only need to add language in additional terms. Who thinks that's true? Who thinks it's false? What do we got?
I say false.
What do you think you have to do? You just wanted to say false.
Use the solar panel addendum.
Dun, dun, dun. Use a solar panel addendum. Gold star for Sue Rudman. Woo! Here, can you get another gold star, Sue? Where is this found? Because this isn't written by Florida Realtors.
It's in our .lit files.
Under attorney addendas. This is an attorney addenda. And I'm going to highly recommend, if you have solar panels, you better use this and incorporate it into the contract, going to the other box, checking and writing solar panel addenda. This clearly lays out, A, there are solar panels. Are they owned? Are they subject to an existing lease? Are they subject to a rental, a lien holder?
Profit share.
Lien holder? Is it financed? What is the amount? If it's leased, when does it expire? It gives you all of the detailed information you need to know. Who do they have to contact? What do they have to do to take over the loan or to take over the lease? And it also covers the buyer, because down here it says the buyer shall have within 7 days of the effective date to apply for the lease or the loan. And to get the approval of such. And if they can't get that, the lease or the loan assumption, the buyer's obligation to complete the sale is contingent upon the buyer obtaining the lease or the loan assumption. So it covers the buyer too. So it's covering both sides. It's covering the seller for all disclosure, and it's covering the buyers from also making sure that they're covered. So you want to use this whether you're on the buy side or the sell side. Everybody clear on that? There's actually a third page too, which is pretty much mostly the signatures, but and it gives the information of the bank.
And we're adding that to the contract.
Yes, you would go to the second to last page. You check after the addenda, you check other, and you write in solar panel addenda.
Okay.
Yes, solar panels are how shall I say this nicely? A nightmare. Yes, that's a good way to put it.
My word, exactly.
Yes, nightmare. They do not give any value extra to the home. And per an appraiser, I can share with you the only way you would ever get additional value from solar panels are this. If they were paid off completely full and there were other like-kind properties within a mile sold within 180 days that were also paid off in full, that also, and exactly what I said, were like-kind, same community, same square footage, same view, and all of that. So then it becomes a similar feature like a pool. Guys, where's that happening? Nowhere.
Nowhere.
Maybe 20 years from now, maybe we could say. I mean, these communities, I know, I think, was it Lennar who's adding them? Is it Lennar who's doing that? Yeah, Lennar is doing that. Maybe in about 20 years when these people have paid those off, because they're probably 20-year loans, you could come around and maybe they'll add value in 20 years. Of course, remember, it's also negating the warranty on the roof. It's also creating issues with leakage on the roof. It's also creating other issues. So will it ever create a value? I don't know. It'll be, and the other
And
thing,
people need to understand that solar panels are literally just a feel-good feature. It makes the person feel good that they're acquiring their electricity from the sun. They are not actually dollar for dollar saving the kind of money they think they're saving.
here's the
So
fun,
that's got to
feel
be
good.
clear.
They feel good until they realize that they were, they were scammed. Yeah, exactly.
Or
Then they feel good,
swoggled.
then they feel bad. So yeah, I agree with the feel good until, right? I'm gonna say feel good until.
I literally dealt with this on my own mother's house, who's
Oh,
one of those grown-up hippies. So for me, I had a firsthand, as a realtor, understanding of, oh, it's such a benefit, and oh, you'll save so much money. And I think at the end of the year, she saved a few $100s. That was it.
no, that's just surprising. And I will share with you, the leases are the worst. Oftentimes they don't even give you new solar panels. You get old solar panels on a lease. It's terrible. It's a nightmare. But let's not talk about solar panels. Moving on. True
Hey,
or false? Uh-huh.
Carrie, can I ask one last thing? If solar panels are completely paid off,
Yes.
then no additional form needs to be completed.
I would still put under additional terms that there are solar panels, they are completely paid off and they're being conveyed at closing. Because
Okay.
who's to say that the seller didn't want to take them with them?
Okay.
Because remember, solar panels are still a fixture, but you still want to call it out because they're not listed anywhere. It's not under
Okay.
personal property. It's not listed anywhere. So I would still put it under additional terms. Solar panels are included on the home. They're paid off fully and will be conveyed at closing. I would still put that. What if the buyer
But
don't want them? Right? I mean, I would put it in there just in case.
But wouldn't you still want to use that disclosure because you said it covers the seller anyway, that he properly disclosed that they're the features about them? So
You
wouldn't you want to
could
use that
say
regardless,
this
even
one's
if they're paid off?
really, well, is this really more about if there is a lease or if there's a lien holder? This is really more about what's happening about it. I mean, buyer due diligence. This is kind of good though. You could use a solar addendum anyway, because it does talk about buyer due diligence, about the cost, insurability, operation value of the solar system. This is kind of interesting that they should be researching, but it does, but a lot of it doesn't apply. Like they have 7 days to make, apply for the lease or the loan, but there is no lease or loan. So the only thing is maybe you want to add this buyer due diligence part. Kind of an interesting thing. Buyer must investigate the solar system within an inspection period as set forth in the contract. But I don't know. I don't think I'd want to do that because you're opening a can of worms, guys. I wouldn't do it. No, I really wouldn't. I would just say they're solar panels and they will convey at closing. They're fully paid off and they will convey. No, because look, you're going to open up a can of worms. You'll never sell the home. I wouldn't do it. Nope. You're disclosing their.
Here,
Yes.
in the disclosure, should we include the paid off receipt then, for the solar
No.
panels just to prove they're paid off?
I mean, it doesn't hurt if you have it, but again, solar panels, if there's a lease or if there is a loan, there would be also a lien on the property.
Okay.
So. But listen, more information isn't a bad thing, but what I wouldn't do is tell them all the bad, negative things about it, because then they may not want to buy the home. Listen, let them find that out on their own inspection. They know that they're coming, let them get their own independent inspector. Don't tell them all the things to inspect. It's like, here's my car, buy my car. This is squeaking, this needs gas, right? Like sell the house, okay? Okay. True or false? Agenda GG is only used if the seller has already agreed to the offer of compensation. Is that true or false? Hello, Miss Casey. True or false? Somebody throw it at me. What do you think, Alejandro?
Yes.
Thank you, Max, for joining. False. I get a true, I get a false. Flavia, what do you think? I'm gonna make an attorney answer.
Wait.
True.
I get a true from Lisa, I get a false. What do you think, Case?
Carrie, can you tell me what GG stands for?
Oh, GG and FF is just in line with what's next on the other under the addendas, because they're being added to our contracts next year.
Well, don't you just sign?
Oh, okay.
Thank you for asking. Okay, the answer is no, it's false. You don't want to use that if they're already giving you that you already know what it is. You don't need GG. GG is including the buyer to make it contingent upon coming to agreement. So if you've already come to an agreement, you don't need GG, right? So you would use the either compensation agreement. If the listing agreement, now we only know this based upon the listing agent. If the listing agreement states seller's broker to buyer's broker. If it's 10A, it's seller's broker to buyer's broker. If they've selected 10B, it's sellers to buyer's broker. There are certain companies out there, I cannot remember which brokerages, they're always checking 10B. They're being told to only use 10B. They're doing sellers to buyer's broker. We are using 10A, seller's broker to buyer's broker. It really doesn't matter which one you choose. But if, for example, Lisa called me, she wants to put an offer on my listing. I say, oh yeah, we're offering 2.5%. They're happy with that. We send them this, seller's broker to buyer's broker. She just is going to take ours, incorporate it into the deal, sign it, and it's done. You don't need GG because everyone's happy with that already. Boom, we're good to go. When you need the GG, as I say, it's 2%. Her buyer wants to go for 3%. They're going to use seller's broker to buyer's broker, but she's going to change it to 3. Now she's going to include GG because now we're in negotiation on it. You follow me? Just because we said our seller was saying they're offering 2%, her buyer wants to come in on 3%. I gave her our seller's broker to buyer's broker so they know how we've agreed to it on our listing agreement. So you want to use the same form, right? But the difference is they're going to negotiate for another point. That's what they're doing. They're coming in on 3%. It's negotiable, right? The seller may not. Maybe the seller agrees to 2.5%. It doesn't matter. But that's why you're going to include it with GG. Yes.
From the list slide, because some agents have always asked me, can you provide the seller compensation form?
Yes.
Right. So if I provide that to them,
yes.
Do they need to submit this regardless? Because we're basically saying that.
Yeah, so great question. So Alejandro gives it one compensation form that says 2.5%. I am happy with it. I can just give it back signed to 2.5%. You don't need to do anything else. Now I would include it as other sellers, broker to buyer's broker into the contract and everybody is good.
On additional terms on the contract.
Yes. Include it and into the contract. Mm-hmm. However, you don't need to do anything else. But here's the thing. If for some reason you're 2.5, I'm not good with 2.5, my buyer wants 3. Now I'm still going to include it in, but I'm going to change it to 3 and include GG because I need to make it contingent until we can come to an arrangement to see if we can get it agreed upon. Does that make sense?
So, if I'm giving the seller saying we provide buyer compensation for 15 minutes.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you as the buyer's agent say, I don't want to, I want to.
Not me as a buyer's agent, my buyer. It's not the buyer's agent, it's the buyer. Because the buyer's paying me 3. So the buyer wants the whole thing covered. Yes, exactly. Remember, the buyer does not get, the buyer's agent no longer gets to negotiate for compensation. That was changed in the lawsuit, and this is what's messing everything up. That is not how this works anymore. This is where people are getting all confused. The buyer did their negotiation with the buyer's agent. That's the negotiation. The buyer's agent is solely negotiating for what the buyer wants. You're not negotiating for yourself. You're negotiating for what the buyer's asking you to do. You're out of the equation. That's where the problem is. People keep putting themselves in the equation. You're not in the equation. It's the buyer. You follow me? You already did your negotiation with the buyer. And if you didn't, it's your own dang fault, right? That was your opportunity to negotiate. Everybody with me on that? So if you have a buyer,
Gary,
yes,
I'm sorry. So when we send this form or we get this form back and they're like, well, we're at 2.5% and I need to change it to 3. Do
Uh-huh.
I need to do that via another form or do I just cross out 2.5% on that form and change? How does
you
that
could do it either
change
way.
occur?
You could do 2.5, you could change, cross it out to 3. You initial there, your buyers, and you could try to send it back that way, see if they'll do it and then send it in, or you could do a whole new form. It doesn't really matter. Make it clear
Okay.
though, and then send in a GG. Because
Okay.
you need to make sure that now it is contingent upon making sure it's agreed upon. Because it's not you, it's your buyer. Your buyer's trying to get a higher amount. Or you leave it at 2.5 and you write that the buyer is requesting another 0.5% for their own closing costs. Carrie Bellish special. And that 0.5% for the closing costs can be used for whatever they want. And if they choose to use it for you, that's their own dang business, isn't it?
What if they don't? And then you,
Does it matter? They're still paying you.
Why not that?
What?
Why not the commission, not the commission, but just do that allocation for closing costs and let them decide what they do?
Because you already have this one saying they're doing 2.5%. So you could sign that back, the 2.5%.
Like, if you say everything is great, we're offering this amount for closing costs.
Well, now you're on the list side.
Yes.
But what we're talking about is if you're on the buy side right now.
Yeah, but they're going back and forth, right? But we just don't know how much the buyer.
Yeah, but the point is because someone has a listing agreement that says the seller's willing to pay this.
Yes.
They want this on this form
Yes.
because that's what the listing agreement says. And trust me, you're going to be fighting up a brick wall if you don't go with what they have there. People are getting themselves in the way. They don't understand how to do that because just like Alejandro said, the slip of the tongue, well, we have to negotiate for ourselves. Kind of, he didn't say it like that, but that's the mentality. You think you're still negotiating for yourself. You are not. It's the buyer's money because they're either going to pay it out of the purchase price, they're going to pay it out of their closing costs, they're going to pay you out of the closing. It's the same pool of money. That's what people are missing. It has nothing to do with you. You as a buyer's agent are going to get paid whatever you agreed in your buyer broker agreement. How you're going to get paid that is what is being negotiated right now. You're either going to get paid it from the seller or you're going to get paid some from the seller and some from the buyer. But either way, it's going to get paid. And if it's getting paid some from the seller, trust me, the seller has probably increased his price on the home, which means the seller's paying more on the price of the home and less in closing costs. You follow me?
you're representing the buyer. If I'm representing Joe.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Right, so if I already pre-negotiated on the buyer broker agreement
Mhm.
for 3%, sellers is only paying us.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't matter where that 0.5 comes from.
No.
Because my agreement already states.
Correct.
So it's just negotiating.
Right.
The seller pays 0.25 of that percent, and the buyer
Right.
pays 0.25%, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Your negotiation was done when you signed the buyer broker agreement.
As long as the buyer truly understands how that's working too.
Well, that's why it's your job when you sign the buyer broker agreement, make sure they understand my fee for doing this is 3%.
And then there is a possibility that they have to pay that. Right?
Exactly.
I think that's the disconnect. Because some of them are not understanding.
And that's when you're negotiating, you're saying, so they're gonna pay 2.5, so you can pay my 0.5%, or we can try to negotiate that in as closing costs. That's where you have to explain that. You follow me? Everybody clear on that?
So, Carrie, maybe I can explain. So, because what some of the other agents are asking is a similar situation that's happened frequently. When I put in my offer, the seller's agent is adamant that the sellers are only paying 2.5%. And so instead of going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth on the 3%, right? Because they already reduced the purchase price of the home.
Right.
So instead of going back and forth, I basically do the calculations 0.5% of whatever the purchase price is. And I put buyer and seller agree to whatever the amount is in closing costs and prepaids. And then when the seller's agent comes back and asks me, oh, well, why do they want closing costs? I mean, technicalities, I don't have to agree to anything. I don't have to agree to tell them or disclose why. But the buyer needs that cash at closing. And
Yeah,
then,
closing costs.
yeah, and then they agree.
Yeah, exactly. So you're just putting it out of a different bucket. Now, the only time that will be a problem is if the buyer is a close buyer, like an FHA buyer, or maybe could be possibly VA. Remember, that's out of a different bucket. So you have to make sure, because commissions come out of a different bucket where you're allowed. And so if the other debt to income ratio was tight, they may not allow the additional 5% to go towards commissions because they may not have it. Just so you're aware, if they were getting also monies to go to, obviously their actual closing costs. That's the only time. Now, that's not really our customers typically, but that's the only time that would be a problem. Okay, moving on. I think we beat that one to a dead horse. True or false? Is a seller's disclosure required?
No.
Alejandro's like, I think it is.
Why would it?
False.
Does anyone think it's true? Thank you, Casey, for playing my game.
It's true.
I stick with.
It's false. What is the actual disclosure requirement?
To disclose, no, the facts.
Here it is. And it's right on our listing agreement. Make all legally required disclosures, including all facts that materially affect the property's value and are not readily observable or known by the buyer. And then the seller certifies and represents that the seller knows of no such material facts, local government, building code violations, unobservable defects, or anything other. And they give you a line on the listing agreement for them to disclose. That is the requirement.
So what's considered a material?
Fact that can affect the value of the property? Well, if you know that they're going to be putting a road through your backyard, that would affect your value. You know.
Even though it's local government building code.
Yeah.
Violation.
Yeah. If you know, for example, that you have.
What's the pool leaking?
That is definitely, that the pool is leaking and you didn't disclose that. That is definitely something that will materially affect the value of your property. If you have a roof leak and you painted over it and made it look white, you are hiding the fact that your roof is leaking and they don't catch that and they find out later. The number one reason, and I know this because Florida Realtors, we always look at this every year and I always find out about it at my board meetings. The number one reason that of lawsuits in the state of Florida is because of non-disclosure. So we create the forms for the seller's disclosure to give sellers something to jog their memory on all the things that they could possibly be sued for so that they gives them an opportunity to disclose. That's why we have seller disclosure. It's for their benefit, but you should never touch it. You should always let them know. And by the state of Florida, it is a law and a requirement that you legally disclose anything you may possibly know that can materially affect the value of your home. So I definitely highly recommend that you fill this out. But if you've never lived there, I highly recommend that you fill it out and you say you don't know. Because if you don't fill one out and they find something, they're going to come after you to sue you. Because even if you do fill it out, guess what? They're still going to come after you to sue you. Tell you that.
But they can't come after the agent.
Oh, Jesus, Lord above. We're involved in so many lawsuits. I can't even begin to tell you. I was just in a wonderful deposition. I had to represent the company. We're on both sides of that deal. So they come after our errors and omissions. Don't think you're safe. Because they all come after, and sometimes they may say, you didn't do your job right. That's what happens. It comes down to us and they say you didn't do your job right. So fun. Welcome to Florida.
Observable. So pool is half full of water and there's algae in the hot tub, but they didn't write it as a disclosure anywhere. Is that observable, unobservable?
I mean, that's pretty observable.
Yeah, so.
Unobservable is it's full, it's blue, but they keep adding water every night. Slim Shady. Yeah.
If,
Carrie.
seller doesn't fill out a seller disclosure.
Yep.
And buyer opts not to do a, home inspection, and then later they find out a problem, does the buyer really have a case, because they didn't do their own due diligence also?
They're still gonna sue because we're in a sue happy state, but yeah, I mean, good luck. And if you agent, you better made him sign a hold harmless, because we still have a piece of recommendations to disclosures, which we say we require that we don't require, but we strongly recommend that you get inspections, and we list all the inspections. Trust me, because I brought it up in my deposition. But I would still make them sign a hold harmless.
The buyer.
Yes, if they don't do an inspection. Yes, Max.
It also includes special assessments if the buyer knows.
Yes, well, that's a different thing. We're gonna hit on that too, but thank you for that. We're getting there.
So I'm just a little bit,
Scared?
No. So if for example, I know that you don't have to, I remember my, passed my real estate exam over 10 years ago was, you don't really need to disclose, like if someone either passed away in the property.
No, you don't. If someone passed away, you don't.
Something happened in the property while listing period, let's say like a robbery or something like that. I mean, does that have to be disclosed to the buyer?
No, if there was a robbery during your listing period, you don't have to disclose that to the buyer. But if there has been damage in the property, you have to maintain it because that's part of the listing.
So
no. Okay, when is the new flood disclosure required?
Now.
I actually saw it somewhere, it was somewhere in one of my attachments that said you have to just, flood disclosure, and it was here in Central Florida. I was like, this, you don't have.
Whenever there's been water in the house.
Okay, I just expecting all sorts of fun things, and that's what I got. Okay, as of October 1st, it was required on all properties in the state of Florida. And this actually is a Florida statute, guys. So funny enough, the seller's disclosure is not, but the flood disclosure is a Florida statute. And it requires the seller to complete and provide this on all purchase of residential real estate at or before the time the sales contract is executed. So this is very important. So if you have, even I would highly recommend, if you, especially if you have any old listings, it doesn't matter when the listing was taken, it's for the sales contract. So you better get a flood disclosure on all properties that you have. Now, if a seller, oh, here we go. If a seller listed a home with you as of September 1st, and now they found there was a leak in their master bathroom, do they need a flood disclosure? What do you think?
No.
I think it'd be an addendum to the seller's disclosure. They have to have a
Well,
flood
you just
disclosure
said
anyway.
yes, it doesn't matter if it's pre-listed, you just said yes, so which.
Okay, they need
No.
the flood disclosure, but not for this.
This is a leak.
This is a leak that would affect the seller's disclosure. The flood disclosure is for things that do not have anything to do with their internal, residence. This has to do with damages from floods, okay? And this is because has the seller or filed or not filed with their insurance relating to flood damage in their property, okay? Or have they not limited to the National Flood Insurance Program? Has the seller filed or not filed a federal assistance for flood damage for the property, including but not limited to assistance from the federal FEMA? For the purposes of this disclosure, the term flooding means general or temporary condition for partial or complete inundation of property caused from overflow of inland or tidal waters, unusual rapid accumulation of runoff or surface waters from established water source, like a river, stream, drainage ditch, or sustained periods of water resulting from rainfall. So obviously, if you have a water leak from your bathroom, not for this, okay? And the reason they did this, guys, is because, for example, like remember Kissimmee totally flooded with that new construction? They did a terrible job with the drainage, and then it completely flooded. Well, there's a lot of buyers that wouldn't have known that those homes were flooded. And so they might have tried to sell those homes and then they try to get insurance. And the insurance is so expensive because those properties all filed against their insurance. But the buyers would have no way to know that. And they may already be locked into a contract. So this is the reason the flood disclosure is required at the time of contract, at or before the time of contract. Everybody with me? Very important. All right, here we go. True or false? Is this where you should be listing any monthly fees? Take a look at this. What do we think? Everyone's staring at it like it's part of the HOA. And I bring these up because this is what I've been seeing from people. Not a lot of people, but some people. I got a yes. What else do I have? I have a lot of silence.
Maybe.
I have a maybe.
Let's say if it's for HOA, then it's just HOA fees. Not all.
Mhm.
You want to put the gardener then.
No, this is on the HOA binder.
I would just only put like, capital contributions or special assessments.
So, ding, 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 Alejandro won. This is page 2. This is only capital contributions. This is where you would put a one-time fee. Certain condominiums make you pay like, capital contributions, something to join the association, something to build reserves. That is what page 2 is about. Right here on page 1 is where you pay your monthly assessments. I have seen people put monthly here and monthly here, and that confuses people because they think you're paying all that the first time. This is not. This is like Laureate Park makes you pay that awful $2,500 or more when you join and when you sell. That's where this would go. So you have to know when you are selling and it's a homeowners association, are they making the homeowners pay something like this? Because this blows deals up. And even though we're not 100% responsible, do you want the deal to close?
Is that where the CDD?
No, this is not a CDD. There's a totally different addenda for CDD because CDDs go on your taxes. And remember, CDD, and I didn't do one for that, so great question. CDD is a capital contribution. And just so you understand, the CDD has 2 parts. Remember, the CDD is for the building of the infrastructure of the community, for like Baldwin Park, Avalon Park, these large places. There's one that is a set fee that is for a period of time. And it's a bond, a surety bond that went against usually the county or the city or what have you. And that for maybe 15, 20 years. And then the other part is an ongoing maintenance to keep up with that. So that never goes away. So that is what the CDD is about. And that is on their tax bill. Okay. Any questions on the HOA? Also, there is a 3-day right of rescission on the HOA. You need to make sure you get all of the documents, the rules and regulations, the deed restrictions. You need to have the articles of incorporation. You need to have the most recent budget. If you do not have all of these pieces given to them and they have 3 days, you need to get it signed that they've received it. If they don't get this until closing, your closing opens up the 3-day right of rescission and they can cancel. So even in the condominium association, where they get to say whether they received it or not, HOA is just as deadly. They can open up the 3-day right of rescission and cancel. So you want to make sure that you get them to sign and give it to them at the time they go into contract. And whose job is to get it? The seller, because only the seller is a member of the association. So you have to make sure you're getting these things. Everybody good?
Yeah, all that stuff is in the estoppel from the HOA.
Yeah, but the estoppel you don't always get right away. That's the problem. You only get estoppel when you're in contract. So you want to get all those documents from the seller right away because the seller has them. They get them every year. They should get them. And if they don't get them, they all have websites that they can log into and download all of that good stuff. True or false? If your seller wants to offer financing, you can write it up in simple terms under additional terms. Is that correct? Everyone's like,
Like the
Hmm.
under additional terms in a contract.
No, it's in the listing. The phone.
What do we think? Do we write buyer and seller agree? Buyer will be buying this home from the seller at a rate of such and such a month for 5 years with a balloon payment ending in.
No.
God, don't do that. Never do that. There's a 3-page addenda for seller financing with, most important, the Dodd-Frank rules. Do you know what the Dodd-Frank rules are? Probably not, guys. And if you're not writing that, you could be getting in big trouble. So do not be writing out some simple agreement that you think you're covering yourself with seller financing terms. Unless you are a mortgage broker, I highly recommend that you use our seller financing addenda, which is actually 3 pages. I only have 2 here. So yeah, see, there's the Dodd-Frank. This is all massively important disclosure stuff that you need to have, which is why all of this stuff is written by attorneys, not by us, and actual people who hold licensing in these areas, like, mortgage brokers and such. So yeah, you just fill it in. The amount, is it fully amortized? Listen, do not be pulling out an amortization chart and giving it to them. Anytime you give people those things, you're now responsible for that. So yeah, make them get their own damn amortization charts. Go to a lender and get it from them, but do not do that stuff on your own. We try to be so over helpful, and that just creates more risk on us. So please don't do that. I can tell you, because I've had more people get in trouble and end up with deposition stuff because they were just trying to help. Yeah, thanks for that. I'm not enjoying it, by the way. So although I am now going to be a real estate, what do they call me? A special witness. They want to use me as an expert witness. So great. Super fun. Just something else I could do in my spare time. So great. Okay, here we go. If a contract is subject to a management company's contract or a seasonal agreements are already in place, is there an addenda for that? Because I know there's many of you that deal with these kind of like, maybe we've got something that's using Airbnb, or maybe they've got something that's got a seasonal, like, yeah, you've got something down in seasonal vacation rental area. Do we have an addenda for this, or do we just write this up ourselves under additional terms? What do you think? I see a lot of blank stares.
Yeah.
Guys are so fun with these blank stares.
No.
Roulette addenda. Oh dear God, please don't call on me. I gotta know. I like the no. The answer is definitely no. That's why they have an addenda for it, because it's actually a contingency in the contract. Seasonal and vacation rentals after closing. This is something that you actually have an addenda for, that the buyer must receive. They have 5 days to get it after the effective date, and they have 5 days to review it, just like a lease. It's subject to. Did you guys know that? Yep. It is subject to the contract. But if you don't include the addenda, it's no longer subject to. It's kind of like the subject to part in the lease. If you don't check that it's subject to the lease, it's not subject to anymore. So even though there could be a lease in place, if you didn't check the box that it's subject to, it is not subject to. So they can't cancel if they don't like the lease because you didn't fill out the contract right. So this is the same thing. The buyer may or may not, after the effective date, enter into the seasonal or rental agreement only with the buyer's approval, with or without the buyer's approval. So it explains how their management agreement works, and then they can determine if they want to move forward. Okay? Everybody good with that? See, 5 days after the effective, it's just like the lease. Everyone's like, oh my God, was that always there? Yep, CDD, it's been there a while. Been there a while. What addenda is required when a seller has used a specific program? And here we go. That most lenders will require a release from before they'll lend on a property. These I hate. Because if you get this, run, because look, a lender will require a release from this. Otherwise, you have to sell the property cash.
Down payment.
Nope, we don't see many of them here. You have any idea, Alejandro? Yeah, yeah. What's that called? It's Addenda EE PACE. Yes. Guys, and here's the scary thing. If these awful solar panel people start understanding that you could use these up here, I mean, these are already like
That's
vultures. Oh,
Cases, and the improvement is windows.
yep, they sell it right
fake
here.
grass,
Mhm.
there's,
Fake grass?
Yeah, I can flip
and
draft.
it's because it's wrapped.
Ah.
It's new.
Yep, related to energy efficiency, renewable energy, wind resistance. Mhm.
Against the property.
And it's not based on the value of the property. You see right here? Not, so that's the scary part. So that means you could be down in Kissimmee in a home that's worth $150,000 and they put like $100,000 of the stupidity on the house. And this is the problem. If you did something like that, right?
Sometimes they have. Can't afford it.
Equity, the problem is you'll never be able to sell that home because no one will be able to buy the home because a lender will not be in second place to anything. No lender is going to want to subordinate their loan to a PACE loan, but you'd have to with a PACE loan.
So in California, they make you pay it off.
You would
at
have to.
Closing.
See, you can't pay it off at closing because the lender's not going to subordinate to it. So that's the problem.
Even though escrow is giving them the guarantee that it's being paid off.
Nope, they're not.
Really?
Nope, they're not doing that here.
Huh.
Because it's not going to be paid off. It's going to be paid off over 30 years.
No, because they force the seller to pay it off at closing. Like we write in the contract, seller to pay off PACE lien
Oh,
at closing.
yeah, no, they're not, it's not happening
So
here
it's a
like
good
that.
deal here.
It's a dead deal here. If you have PACE, the seller would have to pay it off before closing.
Can you
This
give
is
example
common in
what
South Florida. So the buyers moving up from South Florida are familiar with what it is, but they don't understand the back end like you just explained, Carrie.
Well, if they're moving up from South Florida, if they have one, they're not moving up because they can't sell it either. That's the
No,
problem.
most of them, then they had the equity, right? And they're forced
Yeah.
to pay it off at closing out of their equity. So
Right.
if they thought they're leaving with 150,000 and they had 50,000 worth of PACE, for example, just for math,
Yeah.
then they walk in with
That's
100.
probably why in
So-
California you had the equity. See here, imagine you have a home that's maybe worth, 150, but maybe you had $100,000 loan on it already. And then you put $100,000 PACE loan on it, you're negative equity. You can't pay it off. That's the problem.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So Carrie, can you give example, the when we use pacer, is that means that either solar, window,
Could be
what else?
windows, could be solar. Nobody's really going to do it for like hurricane shutters, but that would have constituted. But that's really what they've been using it here for. It's been windows, it's been solar. That's pretty much, I would say, what they've been using. But up here, solar has not gotten hold of it yet. There's been a couple, I would say more like in the Kissimmee area, which is a nightmare because Kissimmee already doesn't have the equity. So if you start doing it in the Kissimmee area, I mean, those poor people cannot, we've already seen 2 in Kissimmee. Yep. Hello? Yeah, we've seen 2 PACE homes in Kissimmee and we couldn't sell either. We had to tell them, I'm sorry, you can't sell your home.
So there are lender program embodied by the
It's
company.
really a government program. And so the government, so these slime bags who sell solar panels already tell you stories like stupid things like the grid is full. They tell you stuff like, oh, we're in cahoots with the government. All that stuff's lies anyway. So if they actually got in these programs, which they can with the government, then they would just connect the two, which is what they've done in other places. And they could say, listen, no problem. We've got this cover for you. You don't have to pay anything. It's just going to go on your taxes. And these are like a CDD would go on your taxes. This would go on your taxes. Horrifying. So if they were able to do that here, which is, like I said, we've seen 2 so far in Kissimmee. I haven't seen them any further north yet. But if they start doing that, it's going to really hurt the homeowners so bad, because unless you have a ton of equity, like in California, you're not going to be able to sell your home.
And then can I ask you a question, where would this be found in terms of the listing agent? Because people don't know what they have signed.
The only way you can find it is on the tax records.
So it comes up on a tax record.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's where a good relationship with a title company comes in, right, Carrie? Because then you can ask them to help you verify once you list a property. Hey, can you look up and verify if they have anything like this?
Hopefully, if you look in RPR or something, we may be able to see it on the tax records anyway. Or if you looked into, you know, the tax, you know, if you look into the property tax assessors, hopefully we'll be able to see it. You know how you see ad valorem taxes? You would hopefully be able to see it there. I don't even think hopefully we'd have to go that far. Because let's say you're preparing for a listing agreement. You know, oftentimes you're not going to call a title company right away before your listing agreement. Hopefully if you're going to go, like, let's say you're checking out for a listing, if you look under ad valorem taxes, if you see some crazy $50,000, $100,000 thing under ad valorem taxes, that's going to be like a red flag right there. I don't know if it actually says PACE right there. It probably should though. So that's something that we'd have to see, but you should be able to see it right under taxes because that's where it lives. Just like CDD shows there. It shows the same place. It shows under ad valorem taxes. Yeah. So, but yeah, of course, the title company could pull it too, but you'd want to know this before your listing appointment, because then you want to validate it when you go to the listing appointment. So I noticed you've got like, you know, $75,000 on your taxes. What'd you do? You know, what, you crazy kids, what'd you do? Because now you can't sell your property. Yeah, because that's really going to be an issue. You know, they have to find a cash buyer. That's the only way. And unless it's like a spectacular home, the reality of trying to take a property, especially in Kissimmee, cash only is going to be tough. Yeah. Yeah. Now, again, I haven't seen it anywhere else yet, but you know, they may be coming. Okay. True or false? In an appraisal contingency, one of the buyer's options is the seller will have to adjust the price, or the buyer has the option to cancel. True or false?
True.
I think true.
I got a bunch of truths. Anyone else? I get this one all the time.
Oh.
It's false. They don't have to adjust the price.
Okay, so truths.
I mean, it
don't
says
have to.
buyer's options.
Thank you. It is false. And I'm so glad this came up, because you guys always think that is, you know, maybe back in the day it was. This is not even on here, guys. The contract is contingent upon the buyer at their expense getting an appraisal from a licensed appraiser on or before, if left blank, 10 days prior to closing. Please put a better date in there. And it has to appraise at least. Now, you don't have to put the purchase price here. And by the way, if left blank, the purchase price. God, I hate those. But anyway, you can put a lesser price here if you so chose. But if the appraised value of the property is less than this price above, the buyer has to deliver the appraisal to the seller within 3 days after. So you do have 3 days after. And deliver written notice to the seller. There are 2 choices. Either terminating the contract, in which case they get their money back, or waiving and removing the contingency and continuing. That is the only options. I don't see that. Now, I'm not saying that you guys don't go outside of this all the time, but I'm saying that that's not what this says. The seller does not have to do anything.
They don't have to agree to the renegotiation.
No, but the point is the appraisal contingency only gives the buyer the right to cancel. That's all it does. Because many times I hear from you guys, oh, my seller doesn't want to do that because they don't want to have to cancel. I mean, they don't want to have to renegotiate. They don't. There's nowhere in here says that they have to renegotiate. It just gives the buyer the right to cancel. I love that. But notice that it gives them that 3 days after the date they give you the appraisal. So you get the appraisal
So
money.
Carrie,
Have 3 days after. Yes.
What is the script if you are the listing agent and the buyer cancels? So now you're sitting on an appraisal that's 50,000 less than what your seller wanted to sell their house for. I know what we did in Missouri because at least in Missouri, the appraisal stayed with the house for 6 months. So now we're on the market for something that's going to appraise the next time at the same amount, and we're over. So what do you guys do down here?
Well, that's not the case here at all. An appraisal is an art, not a science. I have seen appraisers vary $150,000 in a span of 2 weeks. So I can't tell you that to be the case at all, maybe even more. So what was yours? Oh yeah, Alejandro, what did yours vary swing? $500,000. We had Mulberry swing $500,000 in the span of what, 2 weeks? A week. So no, they never come in the same. And the only time that they would have stayed with the property when it was FHA. So we don't do a lot of FHA, so that's really never a problem. So no, that is not the case at all. The question's gonna be, do we think the home was overpriced? Do we think that the appraisal that came in was justified? We would look at the comps and say where we think they came from. Oftentimes we get these appraisals, like the one that came in on Carrie's property. That wasn't even a real appraisal. That was a pencil appraiser by a fake appraiser, if you ask me. So yeah, give me a break. So no, that's not accurate here at all. And so it really depends. I can't say. So if we say to we don't even have to share that with anybody. You don't have to share with anybody what it appraised for. Now, if it came in high, we're going to share it from the sun, the moon, the stars. We're screaming through the mountaintop. But if it came in low, we don't have to share that with anybody. That's not a requirement that we share that, because again, it is an art, not a science. We could have another one the very next day and it can come in completely different, like a $500,000 swing in 1 week. So that is definitely not the case here.
Carrie, can I point something important out about this addendum?
Sure.
And for those that don't know, hi, I'm the other Jules, the redhead, but I'm also one of the instructors with Carrie. So we both teach this. I had to experience this on my own property, but also use it regularly. The difference of why this is so important when you have cash buyers is because in the financing provision in Section 8 on the contract, the as-is contract has no protection for a cash buyer at all. So even though anybody is allowed to inspect, that's a different paragraph. There's nothing additional to protect a cash buyer if they want to walk or if something comes up.
Yeah.
This helps a cash buyer be able to say, okay, I still have the right to choose to get an appraisal. And if I do, I want to make sure that this and this are in place. So this is still a very good form when you have a cash buyer.
Yeah, we use this a lot, but sometimes I'll tell you, if we're on the list side, if it's a cash deal, we may not accept the appraisal. So it just depends. We may counter back with no appraisal. It just depends, because of that very reason. We may just choose to go with someone else without the appraisal contingency.
Fair enough. We're wearing two hats. Yes, it depends on the perspective.
Yeah. What was your question, Case?
The time frame. So 10 days. So your 10 days is up. The appraisal, you submit it to the listing agent.
Yep.
Does that grant you an additional 3 days of contingency? So you actually have 13?
Yes. Correct. Well, the 10 days is just, that's when you have to have the appraisal done. So that's only about when the appraisal must be done by. It's yeah, no, that's not that. It's whenever you get the appraisal, which has to be within the period of the financing contingency, if there is a financing contingency. So if you have a financing contingency for 30 days, it has to still happen within that time frame. The only time that would be outside of that is if it was a cash deal and there was no financing contingency. But let's say you have a financing contingency, it's a 30-day period. That means this appraisal must happen within that time period anyway, right? Because you still have to have that appraisal done within there to be applicable for the financing contingency. But this appraisal contingency can go beyond that to still get your money back. So it's whenever you get the appraisal back, right? You have 3 days after. Yep. All right. So when should we consider using defective drywall? Because it kills me when I see these coming in. When should the home be built between 2019, 2021, 2012, 2015, 2004, 2007? Anybody know?
I was gonna say 4-7.
04 to 07.
2004, 2007. So if your home that you're either listing or you're going in on is not between 2004, 2007, please never use or never accept a defective drywall. We have so many advisors, agents outside that give us the defective drywall and stupid things. It was never, ever, and by the way, we have hardly any up here. There's like a handful, if any, ever happened in Central Florida. It was a South Florida problem, really, more. But if there was any even a chance of it, it would only be between 2004 and 2007. So I've seen them coming in on homes that were 2015, 2020, and I'm like, do not accept it. Do not bring it into the conversation, because then you got people thinking there's a possibility of defective drywall, and it's not, because that's stupid. Okay, lead-based paint. When was it formed? Pre-1976, 1978, 1979.
78.
78 is the winner. Okay. In the sale of a buyer's property addenda, if the sale of the buyer's property does not close, how long does the buyer have to give written notice to the seller to terminate the contract and get their deposit back? This one is also, people get confused. And I can see there's confusion because you people are like, I have no freaking clue.
Can you move the? No, use the-
Oh, oh, where is that box? Hold on, let me see. Participants.
Okay, remove
It's
it.
on.
It's done? Okay.
Oh.
Oh, what happened? They're gone. Okay, there you go. You thought you saw the answers.
It has to be whatever the length of the contingency was.
Right.
No.
3 days.
All right. Basically, you have 3 days after whatever the contingency is for. That's the important part. So you have, if the sale of the property does not close by such and such a date, they have 3 days after. People miss that part a lot. They think it's by whatever date it didn't close by. It's not. They still have 3 days after to let you know if they're going to continue or they're not. Okay, everybody good with that? You need to understand that because sometimes they make the contingency to close, right at closing or whatever, or right before closing. And then they're like, oh, well, they can still cancel all the way up to closing because their contingency goes 3 days beyond. Yeah,
So if the date was, let's say, the 5th, and then they're granted 3 more days, that'd be the 8th.
correct.
The 8th at midnight, 11:59.
Everything is 11:59. Everything is 11:59 in this contract. Okay, everybody good on that? All right, as long as there's an email between agents with buyer's intention to be a backup contract, is there an implied contract? What do we think?
Yeah.
Yes?
No,
Yes? No? Maybe so?
I say no.
I get some yeses, I get some nos. Guys, no. You have to have a backup contract addenda, or you don't have a backup contract. In the backup contract addenda, can the buyer terminate their backup contract anytime, or do they have to go through with it before it goes into effect?
I'm gonna hope it's the same as in Missouri, but in Missouri, we could terminate any time before becoming the first contract.
Well, you hoped right. So you have to use a backup contract and you have to execute the first contract. So if you're going to be a backup contract, you have to execute the first contract with the backup addenda, because what happens is then it says that the prior executed is terminated. The seller delivers written notice to buyer on or before. You put a date that this is going to be valid until. So I'm willing to stay in line with this contract until January 15th. Right? Because the other one's going to close supposedly on January 12th, and I'm willing to wait 3 more days, let's just say. But if that doesn't happen, and we're going to go now, that one's been extended to the 20th, this will then become null and void. Okay, you follow me? And I'd have to extend this backup contract. But as long as, let's say, that other one ends up falling apart, the seller sends me an email to tell me the other one fell apart, let's say falls apart on January 5th, then this one goes into full force and effect Now, January 5th becomes my effective date. And whatever terms we agreed on in that first contract, I have to have my deposit in with 3 days. That starts as of now, the effective date, January 5th. That's why you have to sign that contract with this a backup addenda. You don't have to do anything else. You now have an effective contract. If you don't do that and you're like, well, I told him I've had this happen. Well, I told him I was going to be a backup. That doesn't make you a backup. That makes you a wish and a hope. And a hope is not a strategy, guys. You need a contract. Okay.
Now, Carrie, just to clarify,
Yep.
if your buyers find a house they like better,
It tells you right
before
here.
that January 15th,
Buyer may
we can,
terminate this backup contract by delivering written notice to the seller prior to the date the sellers deliver written notice of the termination of the prior executed contract. So as long as, let's say January 5th, it terminated, as long as it's before January 5th, you're fine. But if January 5th, they told you and you went into first position, now you're in contract. Follow me? That was special.
Scuba diving.
Okay. Everybody understand how that worked? Okay. In a kickout clause, the seller can keep his home active on the market while soliciting for a backup offer, true or false? Uh-huh.
true.
Oh, guys, you're so cute. There's no such thing as active with contract. No, you have to pend your home and you can take backups. That is an MLS rule. There is no such thing as active with contract. You have to pend, but you can still show your property. You get a backup offer. And then once you receive the backup offer, now what happens is that this seller must put down this buyer must put an additional deposit. They have 3 days to do that. And once they give that 3 days, now they have to waive all their financing contingencies. And if they had a home to sell contingency, all of it has to get waived. Beautiful. So it's kind of like, think of it, a builder deal. So if your builder, let's say you had a home to sell contingency, so they said, okay, we're going to wait. We're not going to start building. But now we have another person who wants to buy that lot. You can now go hard on your deposit. That's the same thing. So you say, okay, so now you have no more financing contingencies. They're building your home. This is the same kind of concept. So that's why waive all contingencies for financing a sale of buyer's property. Because you can't say we're going to waive your sale of buyer's property. That means that your contingency, if you keep your contingency, guess what? You won't get qualified for your financing if you had to sell your home. That's why you have to waive both. See what I'm saying? If you're not going to be qualified if you didn't sell your home, what's the point of waiving just that? You have to waive both the financing and the sale of buyer's property. So they make them put down additional money and waive both sale of buyer's property and home to sell contingency. I love a kickout clause. Of course, I'm a builder, so I love it. Makes me smile. But this is somebody who really wants to buy your home and you say, fine, we'll do that with a kickout clause. But if I get a backup offer, you have to put down additional money and waive both your home to sell contingency and your financing contingency. It's really sweet. It's a good deal. Any questions on this one? This is a beautiful addenda. I love this. It's one of my favorites. Okay. You only need to use a licensee personal interest if you're buying or selling the property yourself, taking a personal interest in it yourself. Is that true or false? You guys are so funny. Good thing we're doing this. False. If you are also related to the party. So not if you're taking it, but if you're representing someone you're related to. You also have to notify the public, listen, this is my mother, my brother, my uncle. You need to have licensee personal interest. They need to understand that you are acting as a buyer or seller, or you're related to the party who is acting as the buyer or seller.
Yeah, put that in MLS here.
It's a good idea to upload it, yeah. But if not, do it at the time of contract. I like it uploaded in the MLS though, yes. It's better to do it that way. I always liked it, but you know, you want to make sure it gets in the contract. Because you put it in the MLS and they don't include it in the contract. This is what happens. They don't even read the it's the problem. But yeah, you can definitely put it in there, but make sure it gets in the contract. So whether you're the person buying or selling, if you're representing someone that you're related to, you need to notify them that you are a licensee.
That was a trick question that you asked.
It was a trick question because I'm a tricky broker. Okay. If you are in an as-is contract, this is my last one. The deposit is due in 3 days, but your buyer intends to cancel anyway. Is it okay to cancel on day 4 and never send in your deposit?
No,
Why not?
because you'll be in default if you don't deposit within 3 days.
You are right. Gold star to Miss Jules Carnero. You would be first in default of contract. Your as-is clause, which, my favorite, only takes effect however long. Let's say you're going to have 7 days for inspection, right? The first promise you make is that you're going to get the deposit in this case, in 3 days. So your buyers are in default by day 4. So the seller can sue for the deposit. And in our brokerage, in my office, in Dr. Phillips, we have sued twice for deposit. And both times.
Robert's a second.
What was it, sir?
Okay. Good luck in your new job there.
So thank you. We wish them luck too. So any questions, guys? I hope you all learned something in our Addenda Roulette. I had fun. Hope you all did too. And I'm super excited about seeing you today at 4 p.m. Woo, for Christini's. So see you guys there and have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.